Greetings and welcome back to Pinball Help. Mike here. Work is continuing on this 1979 Stern Trident machine. This is an early solid state game using the Stern MPU100 CPU and hardware system, which is a copy of the Bally-17 and Bally-35 early state games. A lot of those parts are interchangeable. And if you've been following this is the second part of a longer restoration series. The first part was basically a first look and then work on the power supply. So this is part two of the power supply rebuild. And I've got the new power supply in place. I'm going to go over how I hooked it up, and I'm going to give you a little review of this particular model power supply. So let's just go over what has been done. So this is the original power supply that was in, which is actually probably not the original, because this is actually a Bally power supply, not a Stern, but similar. And basically, the way these games work is the transformer in the back splits the line voltage into various voltages. The voltage for the coils, the voltage for the CPU, the voltage for the lights. And then it goes to these rectifier boards, which convert the AC into DC, which is what most of these systems are going to use. This thing generates a lot of heat. It's on the bottom of the game. It gets a lot of dust and dirt. So these things tend to fail. I just wanted to replace the whole assembly because this thing looked really crispy and there's a lot of weird damage. So, as mentioned before, these boards are normally soldered to the transformer, so they're a pain in the butt to replace if you want to replace them. Now, I'm using this particular model. It's called Xpin, is the company, and they have an interesting replacement drop-in board that does not require soldering. And normally you would solder them to different spots on the board. You actually have to cut off the wiring and then trace the wires from the transformer, and they get soldered to certain spots on the back of the board, or sometimes on the front. Just depends on the board you've got. In this case, I'm trying one where you don't have to solder it. You just use these push-in terminals. But in any case, if you want to replace this with another one where you solder on my website, pinballhelp.com, I will have a diagram that will show what wire connections go to what pads on the back of these boards. They are different depending upon whether it's a Stern game or a Bally game, because Bally and Stern use different color coding for the wires on the back. So let me go through step by step how you replace the power supplies, regardless of what type it is, okay? So this is the original power supply, and I just cut off the wiring, leaving enough of the lead, and I took pictures before and after. So in the case, when you get one of these, it'll have E1 to E12. There's 12 lines, wires coming off of the transformer, and there's 12 solder points here. Each of those points represents a pair of hot and neutral for the different voltages coming off of the thing. So there's 6 different things, including line voltage that's coming off of that. So once you've got that, you got to figure out what wires go to which terminals, E1 through E12. Now, here's how you do that. And it's always wise to double and triple check everything. So you get down there with your phone and you take a picture of the transformer taps. Those are the little wire leads coming off of the transformer. And you will see, in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on one side. And if you can't see on the other side, there's 6 on the top and there's 6 on the bottom. And they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and they go all the way up to like 16 or something like that. And the numbers on the terminals do not correspond to the numbers referenced on the power supply board. So wire number 1 coming off terminal wire number 1 does not necessarily connect to E1 on the power supply board. So you have to make note of that. Or you can hook the wrong things into the wrong spots, right? So there's a reference guide, and it'll be on my website. You can look it up at pinballhelp.com, and there'll be a link. If you're watching this off YouTube, there'll be a link in the description to all the extra information. So what you do is you note the color code of the wires coming off of each of the terminals, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a reference thing, and you'll see, like, here's the sheet that came with it, and the original thing, and you can see that on one side you have 6 terminals where 2 are tied together, and then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then on the other side, there's some more terminals, 13, 14, 15, 16 over there. So this shows you the transformer setup, and hopefully it's still in your game, but you don't really necessarily need it. It's either going to be one of 2 or 3 kinds of transformers. They're pretty standard. You don't even have to, but I like to double check. So what I did was, just in case somebody had changed any of the wiring or it was non-standard, I traced every tap. I took a picture of both of the sides and I noted which color wire was attached to terminal 1, 2, 3, 4. I compared it with my reference. So the Bally color codes for these wires are going to be different than the Stern ones. So depending upon which reference, you'll know E1 and E2 would be, the red wire and the white wire with the red mark on it. And so you note those, and what I did here, since the wires were not completely long enough, let me show you. Wires were not completely long enough. It didn't give me enough comfort to go right to this thing, so I extended the wires. I got some 16 gauge speaker wire, and it comes in pairs. So I wired them up in the pairs. And you see right here what I did was I twist tied the wiring together, and then I used heat shrink tubing after I soldered it. So this is a really good solid connection. I twisted these wires together, soldered them, and then put heat shrink tubing. Extended the wiring about 10 inches, just so I had enough. If I need to do any service, I can pull it up here, and I'm not breaking my back, messing with it. So I just wanted to put a little bit more. Now you could get fancy. You could put a Molex connector here and be able to plug and unplug. That's not a bad idea. So let's get to this board. Let's do a little review of this. So this is the X-Pin, and it is a revision A. And this board's claim to fame is that you don't have, normally you'd solder these onto these points on the back, like you see here. But this is a solderless board in that respect. So you use these push terminals, and you just you push down on the little things before, and you just insert them in. You cut about 1/4 of an inch of the wire off of it, and then all the rest of the other stuff just plugs in here. Initial reactions, I'm not all that happy with this. I don't necessarily know I feel that this is that great of a design. My main reason is these push terminals, you have to push really hard, and not every terminal has the same amount of force to make it move. I don't know if it's poor supplies with the parts or whatever, but some of them you have to push harder than others. And I think it's just dangerous because these things are soldered onto the board, and if you push in the wrong direction or whatever, it's very easy to crack the solder joint down here, and then you have problems. So I just don't think push terminals should have been used. I would have used screw terminals. Screw terminals make a lot more sense. You put them in here, and then you have a little screwdriver, and you torque them down that way, and it's in there. So I gotta say, if the guys that are doing this are listening, do another revision of this and get rid of these push terminals. There's no great advantage. They're hard to use, and if you look, the build quality is kind of poor. Look at this terminal is actually janked a little bit to the side. So the build quality on these things is less than ideal. Although I don't know of any other power supply board that allows you to do it solderless. So anyway, that's my only criticism. I think these push terminals, while convenient, are more of a liability because it's easy to crack the solder joints when you're putting them in, and sometimes you don't even know if everything's in there. But hey, it's a nice modern board. It's a nice purple color. That's kind of cool. So anyway, I've got it in here. I also repaired this one lead that was off. So this is all now hooked up right. So let's push this onto the board. Get all of our things hooked up. There's another thing I noticed. On the original Stern board, this is an 8-pin connector, and here this is a 9-pin. So that's kind of disconcerting, and I didn't see anything about it in the documentation, but there's one extra pin over here on this version of the board. So I just, I was like, I don't know why that is, but maybe there's different versions that have different connectors, but they should say something in the documentation. I didn't see anything, but I eventually figured out if you just push this one to the left and you ignore that pin on the right, it'll be okay. So put this thing in, and since the bridge rectifiers have heat sinks built into them, they don't have to be mounted against this back plane here. So that's easy. So I can just, I've got this thing set up so this just slips right in and line everything up. And there you go. And it all should be working nice. So you know what I want to do? Just 1 second here. I got a little extra thing here. It's kind of like a strain relief. I'll put just like that. Okay. Keeps that like that. Okay. So there's our power supply. Shall we plug it in and see? Let's give it a whirl. Always make sure that there's nothing touching anything in a weird spot. And let's plug the game in and see what we got. All right. Cross your fingers. And there we go. That's what we want to see. We want to see all of the LEDs on there. And there we go. Game is booted up. Now I installed this earlier and I checked the voltages on it, and I was getting some weird readings. The 5 volt or the 230 volt and the 12 volt were a little bit low, and I was concerned about that. And I triple checked it, and they still were a little bit low. I put it in the game anyway, and the game has booted up and it is working. So I don't know if this board is faulty or I got a problem in the wiring somewhere, but it is working. I just didn't expect to get like 163 volts on the 230 volt line, but the displays are all running fine and everything. So there you have it. It's easy to replace. It's a little bit intimidating messing with the wires, and obviously don't do it while the game is plugged in, since you're dealing with line voltage and the transformer. But not too difficult, not a bad little product. There's several other types of these power supplies, and I'll probably be reviewing a couple of others because I've got 2 different other ones that I'm going to be installing in a Stern Meteor and a Stern Sea Witch. So stay tuned for those videos where I talk about the other models. And until next time, be sure to hit subscribe and click the bell to be notified, and like and all that kind of stuff, and visit pinballhelp.com, and we'll have more in this series. So there's going to be more continued. It's going to be another part where I show off more of the game and its progress. Thanks for watching.